Hi, and welcome to my second reflection video. This is on section 7 of our textbook, which is about ageism. But it's actually about two things. It's about ageism, but also adultism. And they are two sides of the same coin. As discussed in the intro to this section by De Jong and Love, adultism is when youth is treated as a limited citizen, for example, with different legal rights. And they could be curfews, or they could, of course, be the justice system. And there's a lot of different ramifications of adultism, which is treating youth, and it tends to be teenagers, what we're really talking about. People that in a lot of ways are, for example, we're not talking about a 4-year-old running across the street. We're not talking about normal, appropriate treating a child as a child, but even a child is accorded the same rights as the NASW Code of Ethics. They are dignity and worth of a human being, and the importance of their human relationships. Those are vital from the moment a child is born, of course. But when we're talking about adultism, we're talking about treating youth lesser. And that can often take the form of oppression. And we'll talk about some examples of that, especially how with so many of these dimensions of identity, the intersectionalities is when it really comes to grip. It's very different being a white teenager from being a black teenager. You think about those youth that confronted the Trump youth from Kentucky that confronted the Native American peace dancer and the way they were treated versus, for example, the Central Park, what Oprah called the Central Park Exonerated Five, who Donald Trump took out ads for their, I believe, their death sentence. God forbid. Anyways, adultism is treating youth as lesser citizens. Ageism is, again, going back to De Jong and Love's definition, stereotyping and discrimination based on someone for being old. So that's why they're two sides of the same coin. And both of these things going together, treating people differently because they are younger or older, are dominated by or less privileged than the hegemony of the idealized norm. The, once again, intersectionality, it's great to be a white male in terms of this metrics. But, you know, and it's interesting that probably that idealized norm for a woman, and like if you think about Hollywood casting or for that matter, news casting, is going to be a younger age than for a man, and these are the unfortunate realities. And so adultism, ageism, differing from the idealized norm. And as, again, De Jong and Love point out, more so than religion or gender or race, these things are so normalized, that they're so internalized, that it's almost hard for a lot of people to think of them as problems in terms of social justice. People think of them as natural, as based on biology, and of course that was the argument for, the heterosexual norm, or going back further to the male norm, but even to this day, we tend to think, especially of children as children, teenagers as teenagers, and as old people as old people, and that's a shame. And that's something that we need to be aware of as social workers. I personally came to Florida because my father was starting to experience dementia, and this was back in 2004. And he had been Baker acted, and he was staying in Freedom Village, which is he's passed away now, but at the time he was staying in Freedom Village, which is an assisted living facility. And that's what brought me down to Florida. And we were lucky after over about a year, he did come home for the last 6 or 7 years of his life. But I remember visiting him at Freedom Village and being just aware of how the customers, the slash clients, the slash patients, I want to say the inmates were crying out to be recognized. And honestly, at first I was scared, and I was new to Florida, and it was a big, big learning experience to me. What a great thing it was, and how they would light up, and how good I would feel. And then the last 6, 7 years of my life, I was so lucky being with my dad, and once again, the dignity and worth doesn't just start when you're 18, and it doesn't end when you're 62 or 65. And I feel like time is going quickly, and I need to talk about the other side here. And the intersectionalities with being African American or a person of color. And we're talking when a person of color other than African American, Hispanic, or in this case also Asian, some of the research is showing. And so there's some intersectionalities with being elderly or teenage and African American. And of course, one thing that jumps to mind, and this is discussed in Kathy Durkin's article, Police Make Life Hell for the Youth of Color. And it's something that we all know about. And it's that it's really tough being a black teenage going into a store or being on the streets. Just a couple of quick statistics. Over 50% of all New York Police Department stops are stopping African Americans. And that's nuts. And even more nuts, 90% of New York police harassment reports are harassments of people of color. And we're talking Hispanics and blacks. Another thing is being teenage and black is tough. Being old and black is tough. As People of Color Over 50 by Dottie Curry talks about, it's a black elderly, as the University of Missouri and Kansas State Center for Aging Studies talks about. Over 1/3 of African Americans over 62 live in poverty. They are suffering from a lot of problems with cancer, and they tend to be less receptive to social services from non-African Americans for understandable cultural, historical reasons, not trusting the system, and they are poorer prepared financially for systemic reasons. So those are both negatives, but as both also the University of Missouri Kansas City Center and also People of Color Over 50 by Dottie Curry talk about a real nice positive aspect of both African American cultures and Hispanic and Asian cultures, in that is that they tend to be more family-centric. And in African Americans, they have to be because that's all that there is. And that's also the case in Hispanic and Asian families. There's also less stigma associated with aging. There's more respect, more family-centered. And that's a great thing. So it's our business as social workers, as per the Code of Ethics, to fight injustice. And that's whether it's happening to older people, been neglected, been taken for granted, been exploited financially. That's true of whether it's young people, especially young people of color. All of us are human beings. We need relationships. We need relationships with each other. And I really appreciate you watching this, and thank you very much.